My name is Sarah Whitfield, and I'm 36 years old. 2 winters ago, in a school gymnasium in Oregon, my stepdaughter finished her dance solo, ran straight past the folding chair where her birth mother sat, and threw both arms around my neck in front of 40 parents holding phones. "You came, Mom. You actually came." She said it loud enough for the back row to hear. She said it in front of her dance teacher, in front of the woman who'd been circling that exact sentence for months like a hawk over a field mouse, waiting for it to finally show itself. 4 weeks later, a process server handed my husband a stack of court papers accusing me of systematic parental alienation. Every hair braid I'd ever done, every packed lunch, every whispered bedtime prayer, all of it rewritten in legal language as evidence against me. But here's what none of us standing in that gymnasium knew. That sentence hadn't been an accident. It had been rehearsed. Just not by me. Welcome back Behind Closed Doors Revenge Stories, where family secrets finally see daylight and the people who stayed calm under pressure get to tell it their way. If you're new here, we tell true accounts, names and identifying details changed to protect the people involved, about ordinary folks who held their ground with grace when someone they trusted crossed a line they never should have crossed. If that's the kind of story that speaks to you, drop a comment, tap that like button, and stick around, because you're going to want to see how this one ends. Now let me take you back to where it actually started, because the court file got almost everything about me wrong, and I'd like the record straight, even if it's only a record you and I keep between us. I'm a 4th-grade teacher. 14 years in the classroom, which means I bandaged more scraped knees, refereed more playground feuds, and delivered more hard truths to well-meaning parents than most people manage in a lifetime. Family court, it turns out, humbles all of that. I met Marcus through a mutual friend at a barbecue, back when his daughter Lily was 4 and still called every adult woman in her life ma'am out of shyness. Marcus was a firefighter, steady in the particular way people are steady when they've spent a career walking into buildings other people are running out of. He had a little girl with a gap-toothed smile and an encyclopedic knowledge of dinosaurs, and somewhere in that first summer of barbecues and library story times, I fell for both of them at once. We married 2 winters before that recital, and before I ever moved so much as a toothbrush into his house, I sat down and wrote myself a rule book. Real rules, in a real spiral notebook, because that's how my brain has always worked. Write it down, make it a policy, follow the policy even when your heart wants to improvise. Rule 1, I am Lily's stepmother, and that is the word I use, out loud, always. Rule 2, I do not attend anything her mother is already attending unless Lily herself asks me to be there. Rule 3, I never say one unkind word about her mommy, not in front of Lily, not behind her back, not in my own kitchen with the door closed. People who knew me asked why I was so careful. I'd shrug and say teachers are like that, we plan everything. The truth sat deeper than that. I knew those rules because I had once been the child standing in the middle of 2 adults at war, and I remembered exactly what the middle does to a kid's stomach on a school night. I'll get to that part. What matters here first is this: I followed every rule I wrote, every single day, for almost 3 years. And it didn't save me. You can do everything right and still end up as Exhibit A in someone else's war. Lily didn't warm up to me because I tried hard. She warmed up because I didn't try at all, I just existed near her, patient and unhurried, the way you'd sit still near a nervous barn cat until it decides on its own to climb into your lap. I made pancakes shaped like triceratops on the Saturday mornings she stayed with us, because we were out of chocolate chips for eyes 1 week and I improvised with blueberries, and the improvisation became tradition. Dino Pancake Saturdays, she called them, with the kind of solemn ceremony only a 6-year-old can bring to breakfast. She had a wobbly front tooth that she wouldn't tell anyone about, because a boy at school had told her the tooth fairy skips houses with 2 moms. She told me instead, whispering it at the kitchen counter like a state secret. I told her the tooth fairy runs a route, like the mail carrier, and never skips a house on the list. She considered that answer acceptable and went back to her waffle. The custody arrangement gave Marcus alternating weeks plus 2 weeknights, and on those weeknights, Lily and I did what we called Dino homework, 20 minutes on the living room rug with a chapter book about a triceratops named Trixie. She called me Sarah. Just Sarah. That was the deal. We'd never spoken aloud but both understood, and honestly, it was more than enough. Her mother, Renee, had her the rest of the time, 20 minutes across town, same school district, and the three of us kept the peace the way you keep a soap bubble balanced on a spoon, carefully, and without breathing on it too hard. I should tell you about Renee, because so much else about her ended up on the record, and I want at least one honest paragraph in this story. Renee was not a monster. She was a physical therapist with an immaculate SUV and a laminated weekly schedule taped inside her pantry door, and she loved Lily in a fierce, checklist, protective way that I recognized because it lived somewhere in me too. Lily's 6th birthday party that October was at a trampoline park, timed to the minute. I came because Lily asked me at pickup, bouncing on her toes with both hands cupped around my ear to whisper the invitation like it was contraband. And Rule 2 says a child's ask wins over everything else. I stood near the wall the whole party. I handed Lily our gift, a dinosaur field guide the size of a phone book, and she hugged me around the waist and held on maybe 2 seconds longer than diplomacy allowed for a room full of watching adults. Across the party room, Renee's mother, Deb, watched us over the rim of a paper cup. "What a devoted babysitter," she said, loud enough to be heard 3 tables away. Later, boxing up leftover cake in the kitchenette, Renee gave me a smile so calm and pleasant it made the hair on my arms stand up. "There's only one mom," she said. "He doesn't get to split her in 2. Then she handed me a slice of cake like we'd just been discussing the weather forecast. I drove home that night and told Marcus we needed boundaries thicker than the ones I already had. From then on, every logistical thing went through the co-parenting app, nothing verbal. Nothing casual, nothing that could later be misquoted. Marcus thought I was being overly cautious. I had spent 14 years watching custody disputes ripple through my classroom in the form of anxious, exhausted 8-year-olds, and I knew I wasn't. Here's the strange part. That November, Renee changed. She got warm. She waved at drop-off. She told Marcus that Lily talked about Sarah all the time. Wasn't that sweet? My internal alarm rang, and I couldn't explain to Marcus why warmth felt worse than cold. It took me half a year to understand what that warmth actually was. It was a hunter setting out bait. The Saturday of the winter dance recital arrived cold and bright, the gymnasium strung with paper snowflakes and folding chairs arranged in tight rows. I sat with Marcus near the back, holding Lily's water bottle and her extra hair ties because that was my job and I liked having a job. Renee sat closer to the stage with her friend Priya, and I noticed, without consciously registering that I'd noticed, that Priya had her phone up through the entire first half of the recital, held at an angle that pointed more toward the audience than the stage, the way you film when you're waiting for something specific to happen rather than something you're simply enjoying. Lily's solo was second from the end. She was careful and precise on stage, the way she was careful and precise about everything, counting her steps under her breath the way I'd taught her to count while she brushed her teeth. When the music ended, she took her bow, scanned the crowd with the wild, searching joy of a kid looking for the one face that matters most, and she ran, not toward Renee, not toward the wings where her teacher waited, straight down the center aisle toward us. "You came, Mom. You actually came." The word landed in that gymnasium like a dropped glass. I watched Renee's face change in real time, and 1 beat behind it, I watched Priya's phone swing toward us. Renee crossed the gym floor fast, her recital mom heels clicking against the waxed hardwood. "Are you teaching her to call you that?" Her voice carried to both sets of bleachers. 40 parents went quiet in a way I can still hear if I close my eyes. Lily's face crumpled, confused, caught between 2 adults she loved. But you told me," she started, and Renee took her by the hand and steered her toward the lobby mid-sentence, tap shoes still clacking. I stood there holding a water bottle with Lily's name written on it in my own handwriting. Marcus said Renee's name once, uselessly, into the space where she'd already left. The recital music started back up somewhere behind us for the final number, tinny and cheerful and completely wrong for the moment. For weeks afterward, one question kept me up at night, and it wasn't the question everyone assumed I was losing sleep over. It was this: "But you told me, what had my 6-year-old been about to say?" That night was on our schedule, but Renee kept Lily an extra hour and returned her at 7 sharp, silent as a court summons. Lily picked at her dinner. At bedtime, she asked the question that broke my heart cleaner than anything an adult said to me all year. Did I do something bad? I sat on the edge of her bed and used the voice I use with a scared kid in a nurse's office, steady, unhurried, certain. Nobody's mad at you, sweetheart. Words slip sometimes. It happens to grown-ups too. She nodded at her dinosaur nightlight, unconvinced, and asked if the tooth fairy thing was still true, about the mail route, about never skipping houses. Still true, I said. She fell asleep. I didn't. At 11 that night, Marcus's phone lit up with a message through the coparenting app. He read it twice, then handed it to me with a strange, careful expression. "I am documenting this incident," it began. "This reflects an ongoing pattern of boundary erosion and parental interference that I have tolerated for too long, and I will no longer allow my daughter's identity to be confused for the convenience of a step-parent's attachment needs." There were more sentences stacked like that, cinder block after cinder block. Marcus stared at the screen. "She doesn't write like this," he said. Renee texts me in exclamation points. She once sent me a birthday reminder with 3 balloon emojis. This reads like a deposition. He was right, and the wrongness of it settled into my chest and stayed there. Somebody had helped her write that message, somebody with a billing rate. And if a lawyer's voice was already coming out of her phone 2 hours after a dance recital, that lawyer hadn't been hired that afternoon. 3 weeks later, a polite man in a windbreaker asked Marcus to confirm his name on our front porch and handed him a manila envelope. Motion to modify parenting time, with request for protective provisions against, and I am quoting the caption of my own life here, the stepmother's parental interference. I read the whole thing at the kitchen table with a yellow highlighter, because coping, for me, has always looked like organizing. Page 3, the pancakes, described as a calculated campaign to purchase the minor child's affection through targeted food rituals. Page 4, the reading nights, where on a handful of occasions I'd signed a school permission slip on the line marked parent, because that was the only line the form provided. Holding herself out as the child's parent in written school records. Page 5, the parent-teacher conference I'd attended sitting quietly beside Marcus, contributing exactly one sentence about Lily's love of the school library's dinosaur section. Inserting herself into educational decision-making. My marriage was in there, characterized as a strategy. My career was in there, twisted into something sinister, an elementary educator uniquely positioned to exploit techniques of psychological influence over young children. I laughed out loud reading that one, and then I stopped laughing, because the next paragraph referenced a child's drawing submitted as troubling evidence of parental displacement, a drawing I had never seen, any drawing at all, and stapled behind everything sat an affidavit from Renee with a single sentence I recognized instantly, the way you recognize a face in a crowd. There is only one mother in this child's life. The final page asked the court to bar me from picking Lily up at school or accompanying her to medical appointments. I set down the highlighter. In our hallway hung a photo of Lily and me at the science fair, holding a papier-mâché triceratops we'd built together over 3 weekends. I remember thinking, with a strange, cold calm, they will find a way to use that too. Our attorney, a woman named Diane Okafor, had practiced family law for 28 years, and her office smelled like coffee and other people's worst days. She read the motion in about 10 minutes flat, then looked at us over her glasses. First, she said, this does not get custody changed. No judge strips a father's parenting time because a child called her stepmother mom at a dance recital. Second, and she wanted me to hear this part clearly, alienation claims are fog. You cannot punch fog. From today forward, every kind thing you do can be photographed, timestamped, and stapled into their story. The court would likely appoint a guardian ad litem, a neutral investigator assigned to represent Lily's interests, and that process would take months, not weeks. The retainer was $6,000, which had been earmarked for a new roof, gone in a single signature. Then Diane flipped to the original custody decree and tapped a clause I'd never read closely. Right of first refusal, she said. If Marcus can't personally care for Lily for more than 4 consecutive hours, Renee gets first option before anyone else, before you. It's a standard clause. It's also a weapon, if someone decides to swing it. I asked how often people actually swing it. Diane took off her glasses. Mrs. Whitfield, she said, you seem like a careful woman. Get ready to be careful in a smaller and smaller room. Renee swung it that same Friday. On the drive home, Marcus held my hand at every red light and neither of us said much. I kept thinking about Fogg, and about how I had spent 3 years being unimpeachable, and how unimpeachable had just quietly become a symptom. If you've ever had the kindest thing you do twisted into the worst thing you've done, you already know exactly where I was standing that week. Stay with me, because what that little girl did months later, in a room I wasn't allowed anywhere near, is the reason I can even tell you this story today. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe now, you're going to want to see how this ends. The Tuesday after the motion was filed, I drove to Cedar Grove Elementary at 3:15, same as I had for 2 straight school years. The pickup line smelled like exhaust fumes and cut grass. I gave my name at the office window, and Mrs. Delgado, who once asked me for my Triceratops pancake recipe for a staff potluck, wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I'm so sorry, she said. Your name's been removed from the authorized pickup list pending the custody clarification. There's a letter on file. A letter from a law office, dated 4 days earlier. The school wasn't taking sides, she explained, reciting the line the way you recite something you've been coached to say. When there's an active dispute, they can only release students to individuals named in the current court order. I understood. I hated that I understood. Through the glass behind her, I could see the pickup benches, and I could see Lily at the end of one bench, backpack shaped like a stegosaurus, feet swinging, scanning the drop-off lane for my car. Nobody had told her either. I called Marcus, who left the firehouse mid-shift with another captain covering for him, and I waited in my car where Lily couldn't see me, because a 6-year-old shouldn't have to watch her Sarah get turned away at a window like a stranger. That afternoon the school mailed home updated emergency paperwork, and in the stack was Lily's contact card. 4 lines, father, mother, then my name on the 3rd line with a single red line drawn through it. Neat. Bureaucratic. Final. I put the card in a kitchen drawer under the takeout menu so Marcus wouldn't have to look at it, and then, being honest with you, I took it back out later and stared at it for a long time. That red line was the first thing Renee's attorney ever handed me directly. It would not be the last. Then came the 4-hour clause, deployed with surgical precision. Marcus's firehouse schedule ran 24-hour shifts, and Renee had a copy of it, because co-parenting apps share calendars by design. Any window where Marcus would be gone past 4 hours, she claimed, citing the decree, chapter, and verse. Overnight shifts. A department training weekend. The 4-hour clause, invoked again and again, correct every single time, and aimed every single time. Lily started living out of a rolling backpack, homework folder in one house, favorite stuffed stegosaurus in the other, a library book perpetually lost somewhere in between. She fell asleep in the car so often during handoffs that Renee bought a travel neck pillow, and I saw it sitting on the booster seat one Thursday and something in me quietly broke at how normal it looked, how thoroughly the chaos had become routine for a 6-year-old. I've spent 14 years watching stress live inside children who don't yet have words for what they're carrying. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as nail-biting. It shows up as a kid who was potty-trained at 3 suddenly having accidents again at 6. It shows up as strange, careful questions asked at the dinner table, like a kid testing the temperature of water before deciding whether it's safe to step in. I flagged it to Marcus the first week I noticed. We adjusted everything within our control. It wasn't enough hours to matter against a calendar Renee could read like sonar. Then one Tuesday on the living room rug, Lily wasn't reading. She was holding the dinosaur book open without reading it, which is a different thing entirely, and I've learned to notice the difference. Mommy asks me every night what you and me did, she said, and I don't know the right answer. I told her every true answer is the right answer. She nodded the way she nods when I give her homework she doesn't fully understand yet but trusts she'll grow into. My stomach hasn't fully unclenched since. I said I'd tell you about me, so here it is, the short version. When I was 8, my father married a woman named Carol. Carol had gentle hands and a laugh like wind chimes, and she taught me how to clean a scraped knee without turning it into a production, which, if you're keeping score, is essentially the entire job description of an elementary school teacher. I loved her fast, the way lonely kids do. My mother found out I'd hugged Carol at a school choir concert, and on the drive home she gripped the steering wheel and said, "If you ever do that in front of me again, I will consider you lost to me." 8 years old, buckled into the back seat, learning the exchange rate on love. So I adapted. I loved Carol in secret, in the daylight hours my mother couldn't audit, and I became useful, because useful children don't get sent away. I set the table before anyone asked. I got straight A's nobody had to check on. I became the kind of teacher who documents everything twice, and the kind of stepmother who writes herself a rule book in a spiral notebook. Do you see the pattern? My whole life, I believed belonging was a subscription you kept current through flawless performance. Carol passed away the spring I turned 24. At her memorial, my mother told the assembled mourners she was glad Carol never had children of her own to confuse. I remember deciding, right there in that pew, that if I ever got a Lily of my own, she would never, not for a single afternoon, live in the middle the way I had. I wrote my rule book so Lily would never inherit my childhood. Renee was about to hand it to her anyway, laminated, with exhibits attached. The guardian ad litem was appointed that spring, a woman named Patricia Alvarez, 50-something, sensible shoes, a canvas tote bag full of legal pads, and the eyes of someone who has been lied to by professionals for a very long time. Her job was to investigate both homes and report back to the court what actually served Lily's interests, and I resolved to make her home visit perfect. You already know where this is heading. I cleaned the house to a standard that would have made a hospital proud. I built Lily a binder tabbed for school, allergies, the dentist, her reading log. I printed extra copies in case Patricia wanted one for her file. She walked our home for nearly an hour, asked Lily her favorite dinner, asked me what I did when Lily misbehaved, took notes in handwriting I couldn't read upside down, and believe me, I tried. At the door, she paused and said, "You keep a very organized home, Mrs. Whitfield," in a tone I chose to hear as a compliment. 2 weeks later, Diane relayed the preliminary impressions, lawyer to client, straight, because I'd asked for things straight. She finds the home stable and the child bonded, Diane said. She also described you as composed, prepared, and possibly rehearsed. Rehearsed. 14 years of documenting everything twice. Of being the calm one in every room. Of earning my keep through relentless competence. And the first neutral observer in this entire ordeal had written it down as a warning sign. The exact thing that had always kept me safe was now testifying against me. But here's what actually mattered from that visit, though I didn't understand it yet. Patricia had asked Lily, at length, about one specific thing, the drawing referenced in the original motion. And Lily had told her, matter-of-factly, that she'd made it at school in October, before the recital, before any of this. I learned what the drawing actually was from Lily's teacher, Ms. Okonkwo, who told me only what any parent in that hallway could have seen for themselves. In October, her class had done a unit called My Family. The kids drew their people and labeled them, and the drawings went up on a bulletin board for fall open house. 22 crayon families under a paper banner. Lily had drawn 3 stick figures, a woman with dark hair labeled Mommy, a tall man labeled Daddy, and a third figure with a ponytail, holding what was unmistakably a spatula, labeled Sarah. A lopsided son sat in the corner, the same corner where she always puts her sons. That was it. That was the entire crime. A 6-year-old had drawn the people who love her and included the one who makes the pancakes. Ms. Okonkwo remembered open house night specifically, because Renee had stood in front of that bulletin board for a long time, long enough to be noticed by a teacher juggling 40 simultaneous conversations. Then she photographed it and said nothing to anyone. 3 weeks later, she got friendly at drop-off. 5 weeks after that, Priya's phone came up at a dance recital and stayed up. I sat in my car doing the math over and over, like a tongue worrying a chipped tooth. She'd seen the drawing in October. The warmth had started in October. Whatever happened in that gymnasium had been engineered somewhere in the gap between a paper banner and a trampoline park birthday. I couldn't prove a word of it yet, but I finally understood the order of events, and the order of events turned out to be the whole story. A month later, that crayon drawing had a new name, Exhibit C. I opened the formal response packet alone at the kitchen table that summer, which I don't recommend to anyone. Behind the legal caption, behind the numbered paragraphs, sat a photocopy, Lily's drawing, in her careful backward-leaning first-grade letters, the lopsided sun gone gray because photocopiers don't believe in suns, and in the bottom corner, a small white sticker printed with black type, Exhibit C. I sat with that page longer than I want to admit. I've held a lot of heavy things over the years, other people's grief, other people's fear. I'm telling you, a photocopied crayon drawing with an exhibit sticker in the corner is heavy in a way I didn't have a category for. They had stapled a 6-year-old's love behind a court caption. That's the sentence I couldn't get out of my head. I said it out loud to the empty kitchen, and then I filed the page into the binder, because organizing is how I stay upright. When Marcus came home and saw it, he had to leave the room. That weekend, Lily asked, without looking up from her homework, "Why did Mommy take a picture of my drawing? Did I spell something wrong?" I told her she'd spelled everything exactly right. Every single thing. She went back to Trixie the Triceratops. I went back to breathing carefully. Hold on to that drawing, the way I held on to it in that kitchen, because it wasn't finished with any of us yet. When it came back into the story, it came back in a way nobody in that courthouse saw coming. The interim hearing landed in a beige room that August, in front of a magistrate named Henley who spoke like a man grading his 10,000th essay of the semester. Renee's attorney played the video. There it was, projected on a courtroom screen, the gymnasium, the recital, my stepdaughter spinning through the crowd. "You came, Mom, you actually came," freeze-framed one breath after the word, cut clean before Lily turned, "Before, but you told me," before Renee's hand closed around her wrist. Edited grief looks very tidy on a screen. Renee's attorney called it a window into a confused child's daily reality. Diane objected to half the framing and won a third of the argument. Magistrate Henley rubbed his eyes and issued what courts issue when they can't yet know anything for certain, an interim order. Pending investigation, Mrs. Whitfield shall not hold herself out as a parent to the child's school or medical providers. It wasn't a finding. Diane said that 4 times on the courthouse steps. "It doesn't say you did anything," she told me. "It says the fog needs more time." But orders don't read the way they're intended. They read the way they land. I sign field trip permission slips for a living. In a sense, my whole career is built on children trusting my signature, and a court had just told me not to sign my own stepdaughter's reading log. I went home and did something I'm not proud of. I watched Priya's clip 11 more times off Marcus's copy of the exhibit, sound up. On the 11th viewing, I stopped asking what the video showed and started asking the question that had been circling underneath it the whole time. How long was the original recording? Why did it start before the performance even began? And who tells a friend to stand at a 6-year-old's dance recital filming the audience instead of the stage? 2 weeks into the new schedule chaos, Lily stopped calling me anything at all. I noticed it the way you notice a missing tooth with your tongue before your brain fully catches up. She stood in the kitchen doorway one evening, twisting the hem of her shirt, and said, "Hey, can I have some water?" Hey, that was my new name. Not Sarah. Nothing. Because somewhere between 2 houses, a little girl had concluded that every name in her mouth was a landmine, and the safest word was no word at all. I got her the water. I kept my voice level while something in my chest sat down on the floor. Marcus and Renee had already agreed, in one of the only civil exchanges of that entire summer, to get Lily into therapy, a gentle child psychologist named Dr. Bari, with a sand tray and a fish tank in the waiting room. That agreement is, for the record, the single thing the entire legal apparatus got right on the first try. After a session in late August, Dr. Bari told them both what I could have told anyone from that living room rug. "She's learning that names have consequences," Dr. Bari said. "She's protecting the adults by erasing herself. She's 6. That night, I took out my spiral notebook and wrote a new rule at the bottom. Rule 4, need nothing. Not a name, not a title, not a thank you. I looked at it for a long moment, and then I tore the page out, because even I could hear the old reflex underneath it, the girl setting the table so she wouldn't get sent away. Here's what I knew for certain by that point in the summer. A child too frightened to say your name will still climb into your lap after a nightmare. Lily did, twice. No court order reaches that far. Nothing does. In September, my steady husband hit his limit. He came home from a deposition prep call with Diane, dropped his keys hard enough to chip the bowl on the counter, and said, "We're done defending. I want to go after her, her spending, her boyfriend history, a psychological evaluation, all of it. She is burning our family down, and I keep handing her the matches." I said no. Not a gentle no, a flat one. "I will not do to Lily's mother what she is doing to me," I told him. And Marcus, who had watched me get erased from a pickup list without ever raising my voice, finally raised his. "You don't get to be the only person in this house with principles, Sarah. Your principles are losing." It was our first real fight, the kind with a closed bedroom door and a spare blanket on the couch. He wasn't wrong about the losing. I wasn't wrong about the matches. Near midnight, he came and sat on the edge of the bed and told me something in a voice I'd never heard from him before. The day Renee's divorce was finalized, her mother, Deb, had taken her to lunch in public, at the restaurant her church group favored, and told her that divorce is what happens to women who fail. Her own mother, in front of the lunch crowd. That church, that women's circle, that particular flavor of scorekeeping, that was the water Renee had swum in her entire life. "I'm not excusing her," Marcus said. "I just know where the wound is." I lay awake a long time after that, because I recognized that verdict. My own mother had handed down the same one from the front seat of a car when I was 8 years old. Two women, one shared fear, two different ways of gripping the wheel. That thought didn't soften me toward what Renee had done. It clarified me. The last Thursday in September, Lily spiked a fever, nothing serious, 101 and change, a virus doing laps through first grade. It was our night on the calendar, and Renee, to her credit, didn't fight the handoff. Lily couldn't settle, so I sat against her headboard while she leaned into my shoulder, hot and heavy, drifting in that in-between place feverish children go. And out of that place, into the dark, she said it. "I did it wrong." "Did what wrong, sweetheart?" "The mom thing," she said. "Mommy practiced with me in the car. She said if I called you mom at my recital, I'd get a surprise after. But then she got mad instead, so I did it wrong." The nightlight hummed. My whole body went very still, the way it does at work when a monitor changes its rhythm. There it was, the missing half of "But You Told Me." The friendly weeks that started in October. The phone that was already up and filming before the music even began. A little girl rehearsing a sentence in a booster seat, believing it was a game, believing there'd be a surprise at the end, and the surprise turned out to be watching every adult she loved detonate at once. I want to be honest about the next 60 seconds, because they were a full 60 seconds. I am married to a man with a lawyer on retainer. My phone was in my pocket. One voice memo, and this entire nightmare potentially flips. I did not take out my phone. I did not ask her a single follow-up question. I was not going to turn my stepdaughter's sickbed into a crime scene. If you want to know the exact difference between me and the woman suing me, that pocket is where it lived. I pulled the blanket up and said, "You didn't do one single thing wrong. She was asleep before I finished the sentence. I sat in the dark doing the terrible math. My stepdaughter had just handed me the truth that could end this entire case, and I could never, ever use it that way. I told Diane the next morning in her office, no notes, just the plain account of what Lily had said and what I hadn't done. She looked at me the way an experienced nurse looks at someone who walks into triage carrying their own injury with unsettling composure, impressed, calm, faintly alarmed. A feverish 6-year-old's bedtime sentence isn't evidence, she said, and recording her, or coaching her to repeat it, would be the exact offense they've accused you of. So we're agreed, we don't touch the child directly. Then she leaned back and pushed her glasses up into her hair. But there are clean doors, she said. Door 1, they entered that video into evidence. That opens discovery on the video itself, how it was made, who made it, what was said around the making of it. I can subpoena the messages between Renee and her friend with the camera. That's not spying. That's procedure. They invited it the moment they filed the clip. Door 2, Patricia still has to interview Lily alone, no parents present, no scripts. It's a standard part of every guardian ad litem investigation. We don't request it. We don't shape it. It simply happens on its own schedule. Whatever your stepdaughter says in that room, she says on her own 2 feet. I sat with that, and then I set one condition and made her write it down, which amused her not even slightly. Nobody prepares Lily. Nobody rehearses her. Nobody so much as hints that the interview matters. If the truth walks out of that room, it walks out on its own. The subpoena went out that week. Discovery takes time, Diane warned me, these things crawl. The truth, as it turned out, took 9 days. The production came back on a Tuesday, a PDF of message threads with a cover letter, and Diane called me before I'd even finished my shift. Come in, she said. Bring Marcus. Don't speed. The messages between Renee and Priya started 3 weeks before the recital. Be at the recital Saturday morning, I need you filming. Filming what? Her routine's only 2 minutes. Keep your phone up the whole time. On the audience side, not the stage. You'll know it when you hear it. Okay, weird, but fine. And then the message Diane had flagged with an actual paper clip, like it was still 1998. Don't worry, I've been working on it with her all week. She'll say it. 8 days later, did you get it? Send me the clip tonight before you send it anywhere else. I read the thread twice. Marcus read it once and walked to the window and stood there with his hands laced behind his head, the posture of a man watching his own house burn down from the front lawn, which in fairness is essentially what he was doing. Diane, professionally speaking, was delighted. This is manufactured evidence, she said. She built the incident, staged the camera, scripted her own outrage, and then filed the finished product with a court. Combine this with whatever the Guardian's report ends up containing, and this case doesn't just collapse. It reverses. I should have felt the win in that moment. I want to tell you I felt the win. What I felt instead was one phrase looping on repeat, I've been working on it with her all week. Working on it, in a booster seat, with a 6-year-old running lines and believing the prize at the end was a surprise. I looked at the pages found across Diane's conference table, the biggest weapon anyone had ever placed in my hands, and my first complete thought wasn't triumph. It was, so this is what it cost her. Before anything could reverse, October brought the school's fall showcase. Lily had spent 2 weeks building a diorama of a dinosaur nesting ground, papier-mâché and green tissue paper and a dozen tiny painted eggs, and she'd invited me back over the summer, before any of us knew what fall would look like. You have to see it, she'd said, with capital letters audible in her voice. Rule 2 says a child's ask wins. The interim order said I couldn't act like a parent at school. So I went as what I legally was, a guest of my husband, hands in my pockets, a visitor sticker on my sweater. Renee came too, because it was absolutely her right, and I want to be exact here, it was her right. What happened next wasn't anyone's right. Lily came around the corner from the gym, spotted me and Marcus by the door, lit up like a struck match, and then spotted her mother near the classroom entrance and stopped cold, sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Her eyes went left, right, left again, and then my girl, who runs at everything in this world without hesitation, turned and bolted down the hallway and locked herself in the girls' bathroom. It took the school counselor, Mr. Fields, nearly 40 minutes of quiet talking through a door decorated with paper owls. The whole hallway of families pretended not to be listening. I stood exactly where I'd stopped, because moving felt like taking a side of the hallway. Through the door, one sentence carried loud enough for everyone. I don't want anybody to come to anything, ever. Renee left before Lily came out. Not in victory, I watched her walk to her car like a woman carrying something that had shifted and gotten heavier mid-stride. Marcus drove us home. Lily sat in the back with her diorama on her knees. Nobody had ever seen the nesting ground she'd worked on for 2 weeks. In the garage, in the dark, I finally said out loud the sentence that had been assembling itself in me for weeks. Every way I win, she loses. My phone buzzed against the cup holder. Patricia's office. Lily's interview was scheduled for Monday. I wasn't in the room. That's the entire point of the room. Patricia interviewed Lily alone at her office that Monday afternoon, sand tray and a basket of fidget toys within reach, and everything I know about what happened comes from the report she later filed, which Diane read to me in a conference room with the door shut. They talked about first grade for a while. They talked about dinosaurs at considerable length, and Patricia's notes apparently record the dietary habits of a stegosaurus with a completely straight face, and I will love her forever for that small kindness. Then, unprompted, no question pending, Lily told her. Mommy told me to call Sarah Mom at my recital. We practiced in the car. Then everybody got mad at Sarah. She picked up a fidget toy, set it back down, and finished, Sarah never asked me to call her that. Not one time. She says I already have a mommy. Patricia, neutral as a Swiss border checkpoint, asked what she wished would happen now. The answer is in the file, verbatim, and it belongs in a textbook somewhere. I want to stop being the mail truck, Lily said. Patricia asked what she meant. Everybody keeps making me carry the words, she said. And I'm the one who gets in trouble when I deliver them. 6 years old. Diane finished reading the report and set it down like it was still warm. With this and the texts, she said, it's over. Their case doesn't have a leg to stand on. It doesn't have a floor. We were winning. After 9 months of red lines and shrinking rooms, every card in the deck had landed face up in my hand, and the little girl at the center of it had defended me better than any attorney in the state, to the one stranger whose entire job was simply to listen. So I want you to understand what I say next, because it confused everyone who loves me. I sat in that conference room holding total victory, and all I could feel was the floor going out from under a bathroom door decorated with paper owls. 3 days later, I saw the machine that built Renee, in the parking lot of a pharmacy, through my windshield. I'd stopped after a long day at school to pick up a prescription, still in my work clothes, and I clocked her car 2 spots down before I clocked her, because her SUV is always immaculate. It was still immaculate. Renee sat in the driver's seat, unmoving. Her phone lay face up on the dash, on speaker, window cracked, the lot empty and quiet the way parking lots get at 9 at night. And I heard it, Deb's voice, clipped and certain, the voice of a woman who has never once been contradicted at her own table. If that woman ends up raising her, then you were never really her mother. Do you hear me? You fix this, or don't bother coming to Thanksgiving asking everyone to act normal. The call ended. Renee didn't cry. That's what I keep coming back to. She sat with both hands on the wheel of a parked car, staring at the pharmacy's automatic doors like they were a test she was failing, and she looked exactly like an 8-year-old buckled into a back seat, learning the exchange rate on love for the very first time. I stood there in the dark holding my little white paper bag, unseen. I'm not going to pretend that moment fixed anything. Understanding Renee did not mean excusing her. She built the trap. She rehearsed a small child in a booster seat and sprang it on all of us at once. And some morning soon, a magistrate was going to read her own text messages back to her, out loud, in a room with her mother in the gallery. All of that stayed true. But I drove home that night knowing one more true thing, and it changed the shape of everything I did afterward. Destroying Renee wouldn't shut down the machine that made her. It would just prove the machine right, and hand it a new child to work on someday. Diane called that night with her plan to finish the case, her plan, not mine, and she laid it out at our kitchen table like a general delivering good news. We filed the texts and the guardian's report. Manufactured evidence, litigation abuse. We request fees, and we ask that her parenting time be supervised while she completes a psychological evaluation. You walk away officially blameless, Sarah, on paper, forever. There are days I can still taste that offer. And then I looked at the binder on our counter, at the gray photocopy sticking out of the top of it, Exhibit C, the sun gone gray. And I asked Diane one question. Is the file public record? She said generally, yes, some things can be sealed, but there are no guarantees. Then walk it forward with me, I said. Lily turned 16. She's curious, kids get curious, and she pulls the file, and she reads a court finding that says her mother lost custody time because of things her daughter said in a room with a sand tray. She learns her own sentences were the ammunition. That she was the mail truck one last time, and the delivery took her mother down. I looked at Marcus. Every way I win that way, she loses. I watched my husband, who had wanted scorched earth since September, look at that gray drawing for a long moment and then nod once, slowly, like something expensive breaking quietly and on purpose. So here's what we do instead, I said, and laid it out. The evidence stays holstered. We use it exactly once, in private, as leverage, and we trade it for the whole war. Schedule stays as is. Family therapy, all of us, court-ordered so nobody gets to quietly drift out of it. Every allegation withdrawn. And the texts, the report, Lily's own words, sealed away forever, somewhere she can never read them. Diane rubbed her temples. 28 years, and no client has ever asked me not to win. I told her I was asking her to win something else entirely. The hearing landed on a Tuesday morning that smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee and other people's nerves. I emptied my pockets for the metal detector, watched my wedding ring roll around a gray plastic bin, and thought about how many families had watched their entire lives roll around that same bin. We arrived early. Renee's side arrived earlier. She sat on the far bench in a blazer with the tags freshly cut off, hands folded, and one row behind her, spine like a plumb line, sat Deb in her good pearls, presiding over the whole proceeding like a queen at a coronation she assumed was already decided. Priya wasn't there. She'd gone very quiet, Diane told me, since a subpoena with her name on it had entered the world. Renee's attorney looked relaxed, and that's the detail I keep replaying. He was relaxed because as far as his table knew, this was still October's case, the video, the drawing, the pattern, the fog. The subpoenaed messages had gone straight to the attorneys, not to their own clients' mothers, and Renee clearly hadn't volunteered the contents to anyone she feared. They had no idea what sat inside Diane's bag, in a sealed folder, waiting like a passenger. Magistrate Henley took the bench with the enthusiasm of a man returning to a very long essay. Preliminary matters, scheduling, the theater of it all, and then Renee's attorney called me as a witness, which Diane had predicted with her eyes closed. They want you flustered, she'd told me. You will not be flustered. I took the stand in the gray cardigan Marcus calls my deposition sweater. I've stayed calm delivering hard news to parents in a school conference room. I've stayed calm while a father shouted at me in a hallway because shouting at me was the only thing left he could do for his son. My hands rested on the rail. For once, the file in front of everyone was my own life. Renee's attorney stood, buttoned his jacket, smiled the way men smile before an easy layup. Mrs. Whitfield, do you love Lily? Yes, I said. Objection, relevance, overruled. Short. True. He circled back. You'd agree you built a strong bond with her. I would. You'd like, wouldn't you, to be her mother? I looked at Lily's mother while I answered his lawyer. She has a mother, I said. I'm her Sarah. Somewhere behind my ribs, in the place where I keep things for later, I felt that sentence file itself neatly away. He moved to the documents. You signed her school reading log on the parent line, correct? On the line the form provided, yes. Did that concern you? It concerned me enough, I said, that last winter I asked the school office whether the form could add a caregiver line, and they reprinted it. The reprinted form is itself an exhibit, the one with my name on the caregiver line, dated forward from that point on. He looked down at his notes a half-second longer than he wanted to. Diane didn't move a muscle, but I know satisfaction when I'm sitting close enough to feel it radiating off someone. He tried the diorama. He tried the pancakes. My answer stayed short and boring, which was the entire strategy. Mine, and my careers, has always been that boring is what true sounds like under oath. So he reached for the centerpiece. Let's discuss the video, he said, and something in the room tilted toward the screen, and Magistrate Henley, who had watched that clip back in August, glanced up with the first visible interest of his whole morning. I watched Renee's attorney reach to cue an exhibit his own side had quietly manufactured, an exhibit with a paper trail behind it now, sitting sealed 10 feet from his elbow. He built his entire case on a stage his own client had set, and he didn't know it. His client did. Renee was looking at the table. Diane rose. Your Honor, before counsel addresses the video, we'd request a brief recess. And then the part nobody in that room expected, least of all Renee. I asked to speak with her alone. The hallway outside the courtroom has a wooden bench bolted to the wall, and that's where it happened, the real end of the war, both attorneys standing 20 feet away, pretending to check their phones, close enough to supervise, far enough not to hear. Renee sat because her legs decided for her. I stayed standing and set the folder on the bench between us. Read it, I said. She opened it and found her own words. Be at the recital, I need you filming. Keep your phone up. I've been working on it with her all week. She'll say it. I watched her turn to the first page of Patricia's report, where her own daughter, unprompted, in a room with a sand tray, had told a court officer exactly what her mother had rehearsed with her in the car. Her hands were shaking by the second page. Mine were still, and I want to be honest about why, because I'd already made my decision, and stillness is what a made decision feels like from the outside. Here's what happens if I walk back through that door and hand this to the magistrate, I said, keeping my voice at the level I use for hard news. Supervised visits while you complete an evaluation. Your mother's church gets a story with your name attached that never, ever goes away. And in 10 years, a 16-year-old pulls a public file and learns that her own sentences were the bullets. She looked up at me, and she wasn't a litigant anymore. She was a woman watching all the doors close at once. Why are you showing me this out here, she said, and not in there? I told her the truth. Because you were right about one thing, I said. She doesn't need 2 moms. She needs 2 grown-ups. So here's the one-time offer. You withdraw every allegation today, on the record. We sign a stipulation. The schedule stays exactly as it is, none of your time changes. All 3 of us go into family therapy, court-ordered, so nobody gets to quit early. And this folder gets sealed forever. No findings. No file for her to ever find. It will always say you withdrew, and it will never say I was innocent. I give up the verdict. You give up the war. She stared at me, her voice cracking down the middle. Why would you give that up? An 8-year-old me answered her from the back seat of my own mother's car. Because somebody once made me choose sides, I said, and I know exactly who that little girl grows up to be. She's sitting on this bench. Renee signed. Her attorney read the stipulation in the hallway with the expression of a man watching a winning lottery ticket dissolve in the rain, and to his credit, he made no speeches about it. Back inside, both attorneys approached the bench together, which in that building is precisely what a white flag looks like. Magistrate Henley read our joint stipulation slowly, then looked over his glasses at both tables. "Counsel," he said, "in this courtroom an agreement like this is what a lunar eclipse is. Rare, and a little suspicious." Then he read it into the record aloud. "Parenting schedule unchanged. All pending motions withdrawn with prejudice, which is legal language for you don't get to try this again. Family systems therapy for all 3 adults and the minor child, through Dr. Bari's practice, quarterly compliance review, court ordered exactly as I'd asked, so nobody could quietly drift away from it. The interim restriction on me, dissolved. The discovery materials and the guardian's interview excerpts, sealed by agreement of both parties. So ordered," said Henley, and the gavel he didn't even bother to lift fell somewhere in my chest anyway. And then the part one hadn't negotiated, the part no one saw coming, least of all me. Renee stood. Her attorney reached for her sleeve and missed. "Your Honor," she said, and the room fell into that particular quiet that only unscripted courtroom moments ever earn. "For the record, I withdraw every allegation against Mrs. Whitfield. All of them." Her voice cracked open on the next sentence, and she said it anyway, into a room that contained her own mother. "She never tried to take my daughter. Not once." Henley watched her for a moment, then nodded. "Noted," he said, and that single word entered the transcript, which is the only place I ever actually needed it to live. Deb rose and left the gallery before the session even closed, pearls, posture, silence, and the heavy door swung shut behind her with everyone watching and no one following. What Deb left behind stayed sealed. Somewhere in a court vault today, there's an envelope, and inside it, a little girl says Sarah never asked me to call her that, not even once, to no one, forever. That silence is the most expensive thing I own. We drove home on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Nobody had won, and that, it turned out, was the actual victory. Therapy was not a montage. The first session, Renee sat as far from me as the room physically allowed and answered every question in single sentences. Lily built a wall out of sand tray fencing straight down the middle of everything, which Dr. Bari said was neither subtle nor concerning. Walls are how kids ask whether the fighting is really, finally over. By the 4th session, she was drawing again, small things first, dinosaurs, obviously. Dr. Bari gave her the words we all should have given her back in the spring. "You get to love everybody," she told Lily, with all 3 adults listening. "The grown-up feelings in this family are grown-up jobs. You are fired from every single one of them." Lily thought being fired was hilarious, and something in the room loosened by exactly 1 degree. That's how the rest of it went, 1 degree at a time, for months. The bedwetting stopped in November. The nail-biting took longer. The reading log came back to our living room rug on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that year's form had a caregiver line printed right on it from the start. My signature sat there, legal and boring, the way I've always liked my signatures to look. Renee still used the 4-hour clause when she needed it, it was still entirely her right, and the first Friday she invoked it that winter, the coparenting app chimed with a message full of exclamation points and 0 legal vocabulary. "Thanks for the heads up about the tap shoes. That might not sound like a peace treaty to you. In this family, it was the entire treaty of a war ending." One evening that December, Lily stood in the kitchen doorway with her water cup, and she didn't say hey, She said, "Sarah, can I have some water?" My own name, back in her mouth, like it had never once been a landmine. I filled the cup slowly so she wouldn't see my face. Teachers cry in the supply closet. That's the unwritten rule. I broke it that night, standing at my own kitchen sink. In the spring, almost exactly a year after a wet-eyed recital, Dr. Bari ended a family session by asking Lily if she wanted to share something she'd brought. She pulled a folded paper out of her backpack with the ceremony of a diplomat presenting a treaty. A new drawing. 4 people this time. 2 houses. 1 lopsided son in the left corner, where her sons will apparently always live. Mommy in front of one house. Daddy and me in front of the other. My stick figure, of course, holding the spatula. And underneath, in careful backward-leaning letters, a caption that took her 2 full lines to finish: I have a mommy and I have a Sarah. Renee looked at it for a long time, the way she'd once looked at a bulletin board in October, and then she did something no court order could ever have compelled. She laughed, wet-eyed, and said, "That's exactly right, Bug. That drawing lives on our refrigerator today. No sticker in the corner. No binder." The next fall, at Lily's first dance class recital of the new season, I stood at one end of the folding chairs and Renee stood at the other, which is not friendship and was never meant to be. 2 grown-ups, 1 gymnasium between us, both of us holding. Lily finished her routine, spun through her bow, and found both of us at once, 1 look at each end of the room, and waved with her whole arm, unhurried, unafraid. Neither of us checked the other's face before standing up to clap. We just stood, at the same moment, without needing to. Deb wasn't there. The women at her church, I'm told, still tell the story their own way. Some machines you don't get to switch off. You just stop feeding them your children. I spent most of my life believing love was a chair you had to earn and guard with both hands. Renee spent hers believing the exact same thing, under slightly better lighting. And in the end, it took a 6-year-old with a box of crayons to teach an entire courtroom what neither of our mothers ever managed to learn in a lifetime. Love was never a single chair somebody has to lose. It's a table. And the only job any of us grown-ups ever actually had was to build it a little longer. That's my story. 1 staged sentence, 1 sealed envelope, 1 little girl who told the truth when nobody had asked her to. If this reminded you that loving a child is never a crime, share it with someone raising a blended family of their own. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and if you held proof once that you refused to weaponize, I'd genuinely like to hear that story too. Hit subscribe, because we've got a lot more of these, and I'll see you in the next one.